We're back for week 3 of Best Bets on another incredible Sunday afternoon of racing here at Del Mar. Yesterday was a whirlwind. Saturday, pick 6. In such a good mood because I'm happy to say me and a couple of buddies put a little ticket together and I ended up hitting the pick 6 for 6,600, but we were up to bat for 62,000, and we had a couple of other horses who ran second and third that were paying 22 and 24,000. Not every day where you're up to bat for that kind of score. We got another really good card today. Very competitive racing, 11 races. Hello, everyone. My name is Frank Scottoni. I am your host for this live stream. I am joined each week by a special guest to discuss the best betting opportunities on Sunday's card. Just a reminder for those who haven't tuned in before, it's not a traditional selection show. We're not going to go over each race and talk about all the horses. We're just looking at a couple of races and trying to find the best opportunities on the card. We're going to be very targeted. If you're watching live, feel free to leave us a comment or ask any questions. The show will also be archived on Del Mar's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube platforms. So without further ado, let me introduce today's special guest. You may know him as the host of the very popular podcast, Redboard Rewind, which I absolutely love. He's a valued member of the In the Money Media Group, Spencer Luganbuehl. Spencer, how are you today?
I'm doing great, my man. Great to be on this show. Great to talk to you. It's been a while. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Yeah, I love this because we got a little bit of a role reversal here. Usually when we speak, you're on the other side of the chair. You're the host of the show, and I'm the guest. So I'm excited to flip roles and pick your brain. Tell us, I've been on your show, Redboard and Rewind. I absolutely love it. I love the concept. I often tell a lot of people that sometimes the best handicapping you can do is right after the race and take that information and go forward. Explain the concept of your show, how you came up with it, and what you hope to accomplish when you have your guests on.
Well, it's funny with the concept for the show because working at Saratoga for a couple of years, I was part of the bet squad there, so I was teaching newer players how to play. And this is when I would listen to, all my horse racing podcasts on the way up. It's like an hour and a half drive. And, I was just sick and tired of Pete and JK talking about stake races every single time going up. And I just said, there's got to be a way that we can just talk about other races in general and also just recapping what's happened. Because at the end of the day, you listen to Steve Bick, everything else, everyone talks about, those great buyer speed figures that, 106 for, She Dares the Devil or whatever. But no one talks about that claimer that had that nice little jump up in class and ran in a 64. And that was my main bet of the weekend. And that's what, helped me score a pick 5 or whatever. And for this sport in general, if you're not learning, you're losing. And there was just that big niche gap for that kind of podcast that was missing. And the whole way it came around was funny. I was just talking to Duke Matisse as we were walking around Saratoga, and he's like, man, that sounds like a great idea. And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea really how to get off the ground myself. And Pete texts me or DM me on Twitter and goes, hey, I'm having a barbecue. I want to talk to you about about this podcast and about, possibly hosting it. And I'm just like, okay, well, now we're going to, jump into this endeavor and, episode 156 with renowned author Mark Kramer just dropped last week. And it's been a whirlwind for sure.
I love Mark Kramer. Yeah, you've had some amazing guests. I've been fortunate to do your show a couple of times. And, after the races, like, oh, my horse got beat, this, that, all the typical horse players lament. But then to go back and look at the races from an analytical standpoint and look at things that you might have done correctly or incorrectly, from a handicapping standpoint, but more importantly, from a wagering standpoint. You go back and look at your plays and say, okay, did I bet this race efficiently? Was I looking at this race to extract the maximum value? What could I have done differently? So if you're doing that and you can learn from that, like you said, if you're not learning, you're losing, So I absolutely love it. Can you tell our audience where to find the show and how to follow you on Twitter?
Handy at handy_cappers, where you can find me on Twitter. Literally release it every single week on inthemoneymedia.com and also just through their Twitter as well.
Okay. So you mentioned working at Saratoga. I didn't know that. I knew a little bit about your background, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your origin story in racing, how you fell in love with the sport, how you got involved, and how you got to be, up the career trajectory and host this podcast.
I'd always like known about horse racing. My dad was a horse player growing up, and we had been to Tampa Bay Downs. We'd always gone to Saratoga, but that was, probably between the ages of 8 and 15, where I didn't really know what the form was. I was, 20%. That's really good, right, Dad? Yeah. So I bet these jockeys and this trainer, and I was very big into online poker growing up. And then whatever it was, Black Monday or Black Tuesday, where all that poker stuff crashed out. Yeah. I needed a new venture in gambling because I always enjoyed being that analytical person. I played chess and all that. And my dad was a bartender at the OTB, and I would go in, and my job was to pick up all the losing tickets underneath the table. So that's how I learned my bankroll management real quick.
Super.
Around, and back in the day, they weren't as expensive as they are now, but I had collected a bunch of forms, and it's kind of what I would do is I would go home. I wouldn't know the results, but I would just handicap in the book. And I would just okay, let me learn, how to read the form, all that. And then I realized that there were handicapping books, and that became, I was Amazon's best book person, I imagine, because every other day there was a $5 or $10 handicapping book that I ordered that was at my mom's address that I had to go pick up, or, was getting off the bus and would go get. And just learning the game that way, and learning and just reading all the new books, I feel like if you're back in the day, when you read these books from the 80s, Kramer, Dick Mitchell, James Quinn, if you learn the basics and fundamentals like you would in anything else, I feel like you understand the game and understand the handicapping process more compared to nowadays, where it's I just want to try and find the pick 4, pick 5, or pick 6 that will pay me, 4 or 5 figures and move on with my day.
Yeah, when we were talking a little bit before, you mentioned some of the authors who I also grew up cutting my teeth on, and I agree with you. I cannot stress enough how important it is to read and learn about the game from the guys who trailblazed. Mark Kramer, Dick Mitchell. We talked about Barry Meadow. If you could give a suggestion out there, 1 or 2 books for our audience to get into. I got Kinky Handicapping by Mark Kramer, but I don't think you can find it anywhere. That's one of the rare.
Just from how Kinky Handicapper.
That's Barry Meadows. I have Money Secrets of the Racetrack. I know that yellow cover anywhere.
This one, it's one of my more favorite James Quinn books, but it's called Recreational Handicapping. It really deep dives, just looking through form, etc., and stuff like that. And like we say, right next to me here, I just have a bunch of books. Whether I have it, tagged with something where it's what they used to do for class drop downs. A more modern book that I think is really interesting because everyone likes buyer speed figures and stuff. This wasn't DRF Press, but Speed to Spare by Joe Cardello, I think, is one of the best books for me in just learning buyer speed figures and learning, every number isn't exactly what it could be. There, if a horse runs a 79 and his best number before that was a 50, he's probably going to run back more closer to a 50 or a 60. Then he's going to improve to an 87 next time out because of due to just the fatigue that goes through from running such a big important race like that.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You talk about concepts like speed figures and form cycles. A lot of times, it's the speed figure is a result of the race shape. Mm-hmm. You get a horse who makes an easy lead and is never pressured, could run a big fig, and comes back next time, faces a little bit of heat, and totally regresses. So there's a lot, obviously, that goes into when you're looking at a race and assessing a race. I think Pete Fornatale is going to be very upset that you didn't mention 6 Secrets of Successful Bettors as one of your favorite books.
I see that on the shelf back there for sure. One of the books for me that was one of the first books I read, actually. Him, and then also trying to get in the contest. Obviously, Pete's contest book is one of the best in there. I just, like I said, for me, it was a lot more of, I enjoyed reading the books from earlier on, 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Because, here's a form cycle. This is the race. These are my contenders. This is why I didn't like these other horses. And just me bringing the racing form home and kind of just it was literally practice after practice of just drilling different stuff in my head. And listen, I am by far not a guy who says I'll hit, 70% of my races because I'm much more of a value oriented handicapper. For me, about the lowest I'll go on my line is if the horse is even money or better, but anything underneath that, obviously, even if I'm playing doubles or pick threes, I'm trying not to single horses that are going to be, under even money. Cause at that point, there's really not much value left on the horse at that point.
Yeah, I think the 70s and the 80s were definitely the golden era of handicapping and handicapping books. The game has changed so much since then, but you said earlier, every player should have strong basic fundamentals of the game, not only in terms of handicapping approaches, but also in terms of bankroll and wagering strategies. I think a lot of that is lost today because there's so much information out there, so many computer models, all these exotic wagers that just dizzy the mind. Sometimes it's just much better to keep things simple and go back to the basics. We're going to talk about a couple of races that you like today and what your, how you want to approach those races. But before we do that, can you just talk to us a little generally about your handicapping approach? How do you tackle a card? What tools do you use to handicap? What are you looking for?
So for me, the main tool was obviously the racing form to start off with. Now it's much more. I'm a PDF guy. I use Formulator, and a big thing that I think I do differently than other people is I handicap from the furthest race down. So I pretty much go bottom to top instead of top to bottom. And I start off every race by looking at a favorite. And for me, that's where the race has to start. If I think that this favorite is, Arrogate on any one of his great days, where he's going to be a 20-point buyer speed figure favorite, like maybe that's a race that I don't need to spend too much time on. But if I see a horse that, maybe doesn't like Del Mar, he's 0 for 5, doesn't like the distance that much, and now is stretching back out even farther than he's ever been before. Those are the races where I kind of just quickly circle, and I'm going through every race before I even start back at race 1. And something else I've been doing recently is I'm kind of doing it based on, I'll do dirt sprints, then dirt routes, then turf sprints, and then turf routes, because it's hard for me to change my mind over when I go from a dirt sprint maiden claimer to a grade 1 turf route. And you need a different set of tools for that out of your toolbox. So I really try to do a lot of prepping and planning. I have a hot jockey and hot trainer list, which everyone thinks like would mean, oh, the jockey that won 4 races yesterday. No, to get on this list, they have to have won 2 races in the last week at a $10 mutual or better. And then I even have a board hitting one where if they hit the board 4 times with 10-1 shots or better. That way I'm not just throwing out horses for when I do like to jump into exotic pools like exactas, possibly even trifectas. And just like I said, if you're not, trying something different every day, or at least compensating by, taking notes down as you can do in Formulator and all these other wonderful tools, that's the way you can get better at this game.
You just taught me something. Now I'm going to try something different next time I handicap. I never heard anyone talk about grouping races together based on distance. So looking at the sprint races, because your mind is in that. Okay, yep. Who's going to make the lead? Which part of the track do you want to be on? That's really, and then moving to dirt routes and then turf sprints, turf routes. I'm going to try that. I like that. If you're not learning, you're losing, right? So, we talked a little bit about all the exotic wagers that are out there and how sometimes keeping things simple is the way to go. We're going to talk about 3 races that you like today. When you sent me who you liked and how you were approaching the races, I was really excited to talk to you because you're a value line player. You are looking for horses who will fit a certain criteria, and you will then bet those horses based on the odds, looking for value. So tell us a little bit about that approach, because a lot of times when I have people on this show, they're just, they're looking to crush 1 or 2 wagers, and that's fine. And I love that approach too. And that's often how I play. But this will give our audience a little way to think differently about how they look at the races as well.
I just feel with value lines, if you're just a win player like I am 80% of the time, it makes it real easy to figure out what races I'm playing and what races I'm passing. And when I say, also give yourself some credit when you pass a race. I call it a courageous pass, because if you're passing a race, the bankroll stays in flux. You're not stretching out something that you think may or may not happen, because this game is hard enough to beat as is with the takeout, etc. So when I make an odds line, I'm just trying to guess, if I can have the winner of the race in my contenders 4 to 5 races, and that one race that has that oddball 35 to 1, 80 to 1 shot win, I'm not going to have that. If I'm looking at if I can wager halfway through the race, I'm not going to have that winner. So I kind of give myself that 20% little shot to, make a mistake. But if I'm hitting 80% of the time and I'm hitting horses that, aren't 3 to 5 to 8 to 5, I should in some way be making money. Now, if for some reason, my handicapping is on and I'm hitting those contenders, but my wagering isn't doing well, that's half the battle at least. I know, okay, your handicapping is solid. Where are you messing up on the wagering side? That's where the value line comes in. It kind of makes it impossible for you to mess up on that wagering side.
Well, just explain to the audience a little bit about what a value line is and how you kind of, Pete and I used to say, well, let's hang a number on this horse, 5 to 2, whatever. So, tell us a little bit about that.
So for everyone, whether you open up the racing form before, it's going to be your first time, you're always going to see a number in there, and that's called the morning line. And the morning line is based on what someone who in the racing office thinks that the public, whoever that would be, will make this horse by post time. And there's good morning line makers, and unfortunately, there's not so good morning line makers. So I kind of take that idea out, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make my own line. So when I make a value line, I'm trying to find not so much I'm trying to find the winner of the race, but I'm trying to find the contenders of a race. If there's 10 horses in the field, man, if I could knock out 6 horses and get it down to those 4, well, now I'm getting somewhere. Okay, now out of these 4 horses, how do I like them in what order? And then once I have an order for them, I try to start off with my most likely winner. And let's say the horse would be, 2 to 1. Now no other horse below that can be, better than 2 to 1. So it might just be something simple as 2 to 1, 5 to 2, 3 to 1, and 7 to 2. But maybe, the 4th best contender has a bad jockey or a low trainer for that race. Okay, maybe he's more like 5 to 1. And by doing that, as long as I'm good at it and I'm at least, you can make a value line and not do well because you just don't understand like where you're placing the horse on your list.
But if your value line's wrong, you're not going to make money.
Listen, I'm not teaching you guys how to make millions of dollars. This is not how you do it. This is a good start if you're a beginner because, listen, if you take 10 races and you say, oh my God, this idea stinks, that's not the way to look at it. Do it for probably a month is the best way to do it. Because if you're a weekend warrior, at least doing it for those, 8 cards for that month. I would say do it out of 100 races, 50 at minimum, and just see where you stand. If your third choice is winning a lot more than your top choice, well, then figure out how to make your third choice your top pick. And then all of a sudden you're going to be like, wow, these 8 to 1 shots on top, that you have as a value line of, 2 to 1, they're going off at 10 to 1. You're seeing something the public isn't. That's how you make money at the races.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about finding value. It's all about betting on overlays. Mm-hmm. If you are setting value lines and you're sticking to them, you will make money in the long run. Like you said, it's not glamorous. It's not hitting a pick 6 or a pick 5 or whatever. But if your ROI is positive at the end of the day, you're winning at the races. And we know how hard this game is with takeout. So you need to have a very disciplined approach if you want to kind of just grind it out and make a profit.
You talk about, if you do it long term, you'll make money. That's where bankroll comes in. If you are going to start with $100 and you're going to play $20 a race, you're going to go broke whether you use a value line or not. If you're starting with $100, like for me, for a beginning player, I tell them start with $5 a race, because if you go, whatever it would be, 0 for 10 or 0 for 12, at least you still have a little bit of money left there that you can try and recoup. But if you're not using proper bankroll management and like putting a percentage to where you're making your bets, like, I use sports betting now, for how much everyone doesn't like that it's coming into our, taking a piece of our pie. It's good because there's so many good bankroll management people in that sport. You can take it right from there into horse racing, and then all of a sudden you kind of understand it a little bit better.
Yeah, quick question for you about bankroll management. You I'm sure you allocate a certain percentage of your bankroll to the races you want to play, but have there ever been times where you just absolutely love a horse and you know that you're getting the best of it in terms of odds and step out of that comfort zone and maybe bet double or triple that what you would normally bet?
Every Saturday with Pete up at the spa. For me, especially like when I'm on days like that, like if I'm up at Saratoga with a bunch of friends and, maybe I've been on a bit of a heater, well, I tiptoe out, kind of like stepping up, as they would say, like in poker, going from, 1-2 to 2-5, like when you're stepping up in limits. Sure, I'll do it once or twice, but I mean, we're talking, Arrowgate races where he's 6-5 against California Chrome. Like, I'm not doing this on 4-1 shots. I'm doing this where I'm getting like super, super slim margins. If I miss, well, it's going to hurt me for a little while. But that's what you have to do with your best bets. If you're betting not enough where it's going to hurt a little bit, and you're making a prime play, you're probably betting too small.
Yeah.
It has to hurt a little bit if you miss, because if you miss, then you're going to want to get better. But if you are if you could lose $20 a race and you're playing for $5, it's kind of hard mentally to get that to work out in your favor.
Yeah, that's a good point. You really have to know the times when you need to be aggressive. And if you miss, you just have to turn the page. I will say that's probably the biggest weakness in my game. I'm not aggressive enough. Yeah. I have a lot of really good opportunities, and I find a lot of value. And I think if someone looked at my game and said, here's where you need to be better, you need to be more aggressive. You have great opinions. You need to do better with them. You need to take more money out of the race when you're right. So these are just all these things that we need to think about as horse players. But let's dig into the races. We got about 10 minutes to talk about 3 races. Race 6 is the first one you wanted to speak about. So it is a maiden special weight for 2-year-old fillies going 5 furlongs on the main track. Morning line favorite is sent out by Mr. Baffert, number 8, doing it the hard way, 5-2. First time starter, top jock, drawn favorably, 2 decent works over the track. That's the horse who's going to take most of the money. I think the horse will be shorter than 5-2. Always a tough decision in a juvenile race when there's a Baffert. What do? Do you use the overbet Baffert or look for value elsewhere and try to beat the horse?
If you want to use the overbet Baffert, if you just want to use the Baffert in general, if you're using, pick 5, pick 6, whatever, you guys can do that. I'm just trying to give you guys a little bit different of an angle. Definitely Bolt number 4 and Bolt's Babe, both Diora being the sire, 26%. And listen, for me, when I'm in these 2-year-old races, Shelby Ruiz is the trainer. She's 0 for 11 in the last 5 years with 2-year-olds like this in this kind of spot. But the workouts, Baffert works everything quick. So when I see fast workouts out of the Baffert barn, that's not a big deal to me. When I see 59-2 out of a 2-year-old out of Shelby Ruiz's barn, that for me is a little bit bigger of a shake. And with both of these horses being 10-1, I know up on the sheet it says bet them at 3-1 or better. They're probably both going to be better than 3-1. So these are 2 that I'm definitely going to try to use a win Dutch, and that's why they have to both be better than 3-1. And I'm trying to get lucky here. If you wanted to use another one, Pride of the Nile is another one. The 2, Umberto Rispoli and Doug O'Neill. Doug had a really good first opening week here where he had a couple good long shots hit, and Rispoli being 22%, kind of hard to miss. This one also hits 14% 2-year-old debut sires. I just feel like these are the 3 that I kind of want to mess around with. And listen, when Baffert wins by 5, am I going to be surprised? No, but I'm willing to take a shot here and get some extra value in this race.
Well, yeah, you just know that these horses are going to be so much better value because the Baffert, while the most likely winner at probably 9-5, is probably going to go off at 4-5. You know what I mean? So there will be extra juice on the other horses. A couple of things about Shelby Ruiz. Her dad trained Bolt Doro. So keeping it in the family, I love it. I think she's very competent. I think part of the reason her stats, small sample size, I think you said 0 for 11. Yeah. She's probably never had any really precocious horses in her barn. And you make a good point about offspring of Bolt Doros are firing at like 28%, which is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. So I love that. Talk to me a little bit about strategy, because I don't often Dutch. If I do Dutch, it's usually with 2 long shots who I think have a very good chance of winning. A lot of times, though, if I do like those horses and I like someone in the next race, I'll try to get value playing doubles. But if these horses are the same price, would you bet them equally? If they're different prices, would you bet more on one and less on the other? Talk to me about that strategy a little bit.
I feel like with listening to Barry Meadow, everyone's going to think oh, he bet different amounts. No, for me, this game is tough enough that my brain needs to be so self-centered. It's going to be, whatever I bet on one, I'm going to bet on the other. Hopefully they get through. And I think with just 2-year-old racing in general, for me, it's sire stats for me and then trainer stats. Like if a sire is 20% and the trainer maybe, is average to a little bit below average with that first time starter stat, that's not the worst thing for me. My instant tosses in 2-year-old races are horses that have 6% first time out of the gate with a new sire and stuff like that. That tells me that the horses are probably going to be more better at 3 and 4, and they can still end up having good careers. Just because you lose your first race like Secretary doesn't mean you're going to have a bad career. You're just trying to find a way through this race. Another big key thing with the Baffert horse, I forgot to say before as well, the dam had never raced, and this is the first time. This is the first foal out of both of them. Bolt's Babe and definitely Bolt have some horses that have been on the track and have some wins across them as well. So just an extra added feature. I think that might make this race a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, and with the breeding on the Baffert, I mean, this horse is probably going to want 2 turns in the near future. So very, very interesting. If you can beat the Baffert, you will get paid handsomely, as they say. All right, let's move on to race 7. Calbred, $20,000. Allowance optional claimer, contested at 8 furlongs on the turf with the rails at 12 feet. Talk about a contentious race with the morning line favorite, number 5, Worst Reed Sanchez, at a lofty 9-2. Not even John White knew who the public was really going to gravitate to, and nor do I. I had to do this race for the Del Mar website. I wrote it up. You can go to dmtc.com and read my analysis. I felt like I could have landed on several different horses. I ended up taking a stand on number 2, Big Hand. But I know you have some opinions in this race and how you want to approach it.
I got this race down to 3 contenders. Let's talk about the first one, race number 7, Shot of a Lifetime. Kyle Frey was very, very good opening weekend. Had a couple nice long shot winners. Listen, I'm tossing the last race out on the dirt. Figure was fine, but I mean, why am I going to look at dirt races when the race is going to be on the turf? That race 2 back, obviously one gets claimed out by Bill McLean. And maybe they've been looking forward to getting this one back on the turf all along. 81 was the buyer. Listen, it's a claiming race. Now we're going into those state bred N1Xs, which, can be a little bit more difficult. But, I mean, the 81, I think, fits right in with that buyer par. I'm going to drop it 6 points based on an old James Quinn reference. Drop it 6 points for routes, 5 points for sprints. I think this one kind of fits in right there. We're going to go a little bit farther to the outside. Doc Adams. Nice form. The 40 N1X, the races on the dirt, the shows this one's still in good form. Had the one race on turf in the starter race with a 74. But, I mean, if we're seeing this horse in good form, now we get second time turf. Unusual heat, by the way, on the bottom. That, to me, is always good when I'm watching Southern California racing.
That's right. Yep.
I think this one might show a little bit extra as well. I would like Maldonado maybe to have a little bit more, have this horse be more out in front. But if he's got to sit in track, I'm not too upset with that either. Joe Don Mooney, the one on the outside, every single figure from the claiming 40s to the optional, the N1X 20s, 75 to a 73. If no one in here really jumps forward, I think that this one has just run so many consistent races. If you're not going to use on top, definitely one that you should be using underneath at more value.
So let's say all 3 of these horses meet your value line criteria.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say for a player out there who's, wants to spend $100 today, and this is the race that they want to bet. Like, how would you allocate your funds, or would you bet all 3, or would you just take the higher price?
I never bet more than 2 a race, and the way I would look at it is if my top pick reaches my value line, the other 2 are just not null and void, but obviously because I have the top pick at 3 to 1.
Okay.
If the 7 and 10 are both above 3 to 1, I'll just Dutch. If the 3 is 5 to, or if the 7's at 5 to 2, then I'll move to the 10. If the 10 doesn't hit my value line, I move to the 11. If none of them hit, I pass the race.
I see. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, just one of our listeners here has a quick question. Can you repeat the name of the contest book you recommended reading? I forget the one that Pete wrote, but what is it? I forget what it's called.
Pete wrote.
Right? Is that the one we were talking about?
So it'd be right here.
The Winning Contest Player. Okay. Yeah, that is a great book. All right. Well, thanks for chiming in. If anybody else has any comments, please join the chat. Okay, let's move on to race 9.
I think in this race for me, just listen, another optional 20 N1X, 5 furlongs on the turf. I feel like everyone who is in racing and maybe isn't brand new to it struggles in these turf sprints. And for me, I just kind of saw two horses. The first one being Iconic Sky, another one Unusual Heat on the bottom. If you look at that last race, it was a 63 on the buyer speed figure. Needs to definitely improve a little bit, but there was nothing else really in this race that, you know, when you look at the favorite Dancing Dana, off the layoff 6% and inter sprint 0 for 17 for this trainer. Those last three
Yeah,
figures should blow the field out of the water, but I just seeing that, and listen, did run a 70 off the layoff and got a win, three back. I'm looking for regression. I'm just seeing this at 5 and not at 6.5. That's a big difference than down the hill. Some horses they just
yeah.
excel down the hill. Now we get 5, and I feel like that's the biggest misconception for Southern California is everyone expects horses that are good at Santa Anita turf should just come over to Del Mar and be fine. And I think that's where a lot of favorites go just up the track, and you start seeing these bigger bomb horses come in. Like I said, Iconic Sky had that 63. Now we get second time turf with Unusual Heat on the bottom. I'm looking for improvement, and I think we're going to see some today. The other one being the number 4, Miss O'Brien, had the maiden win 2 back with a 65. That was first off the trainer switch now with Dan Blacker. Dan ran him back in the optional 20. Didn't miss by much. Everyone's going to see that 4 and not see a board hit, but lost by less than 3 lengths. Obviously needs to improve. If the favorite doesn't run in the 70s, this race is absolutely wide open. I'm going to give one other one that I just think for me is going to be a board hit, and that's going to be Dee's Lovely Sophia. 0 for 5 at Del Mar, 0 for 7 at the distance, which is scary, so I'm not going to put on top. But Joe Bravo has been riding lights out for me this meet, and I just think if this one also can run around that high 60 to low 70 buyer, this one can also surprise and has a really, really good pilot aboard. Not that Kyle Fry isn't bad, just Joe for me is a little bit of a plus.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that John White is an excellent morning line maker, and he knows a lot more than I do when it comes to making morning line. But I was kind of shocked he made number 1 Dancing Dana, the 7-2 morning line favorite. I'd be surprised if number 4 Miss O'Brien didn't go off as favorite. She was favored last time at this level at 2-1, and she ran a very good race. She just got a little tired going 6 furlongs, so cutting back. Drawn outside her main rival on the inside. I don't know. I was surprised. If you got any piece of 6-1 on number 4, oh my gosh, you unload the bankroll. I agree more with you. I mean, I think that horse is probably going to be in the 2-1, 3-1 range. But if you can get 5-2 or better, that's good. You mentioned the Andy Mathis horse. Andy Mathis is a very, very good Northern California trainer. When he brings horses down here, they are very well intentioned. He is already off to a very good start this meet. He's got a bunch of wins already, and I talked about this on Pete's podcast. There were times in years past where you could almost toss these Golden Gate horses with impunity, or even the Golden Gate trainers, but not anymore. It's a much more level playing field. So I like your horses in this race. I think you absolutely have to take on the 1. Spencer, anything else you want to add? Anything you got cooking coming up that we need to look out for?
Just Redboard Rewind. I'm going to be dropping again Monday, Tuesday. I'm still trying to wait last second for a guest here. I had a couple people who sent me stuff that just weren't available this week, so I'm still waiting on a guest. I do some stuff over at AVR called the Big Race Showdown with people like Ashley Mayu, Mike Somich, etc., Naomi Tucker, just a bunch of us who kind of look at stake races throughout the week and give our top selections, but also they follow Trifecta and Exacta wagering as well. So stuff to check out as well.
I was just quickly looking at the form again from that last race, and I want to throw in a price horse who I like that if you're playing exotics, you might want to think about including with Spencer's horses. Number 9, Essential Business for Peter Miller. Just something to look out for. This horse is owned by the Robesons. The Robesons like to come here in the summertime and win races. And a lot of times you will see horses from the minor league circuits who don't look that fast come here for the Robesons, trained by Peter Miller. They often pop at a price. I think this horse is a little sneaky. He puts up Valdivia maybe to get a little bit of a price because, you might not be paying attention to him with so many other big name jockeys in the race. But I think that's a horse you can maybe include in your exotics as well. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Best Bet Seminar. If you're live on track today at 1:05, I will be down by the Seaside Terrace, west side of the apron, past the grandstand. My guest today is Mike Shuddy. He's a very good exotics player. He'll probably talk about getting bombs underneath in trifectas and superfectas, something that my brain has a very hard time computing. Again, you can check out my daily race analysis at dmtc.com. Big thanks to Spencer Lugenbuehl for joining us. If you're serious about becoming a better horse player, you really need to check out Redboard Rewind. It's one of my favorite podcasts, and it's an excellent resource. And he always has some really great guests and some high-level thinkers on there sharing their thoughts. Good luck to us, and let's make some money. See everybody next week. Thanks again, Spencer.
You got it, my man.